Good morning. Today is Tuesday, April 16th, and this is my final project submission. I picked Winston Churchill by William Garrity, Centenary University. Biography. Winston Churchill is the name that he is known by, but his full name is Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. Winston Churchill was born November 30th, 1874, in Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, England. Winston Churchill's family consists of his father, Lord Randolph Churchill, who was a politician in the Tory party. This political party was a conservative party. Winston Churchill's mother was Jeanette Jerome, also known as Jenny. Jenny was the daughter of Leonard W. Jerome, who was a horse racing enthusiast and New York financier. Winston's mother, Jenny, moved to Paris in 1867 and met Lord Randolph Churchill in 1873. They were married in 1874. Winston has one sibling, a brother named John Strange Spencer Churchill, also known as Jack. Jenny was also a writer. In 1899, she founded and edited the Anglo-Saxon Review, as well as two plays, one named The Bill, which came out in 1913, and the other Short Talks on Big Subjects, which came out in 1916. Winston Churchill has a long line of military and political ancestry. Winston's father was the youngest son of the 7th Duke of Marlborough. Another ancestor, also named John Churchill, won several military battles in Europe for Queen Anne 200 years earlier. Winston Churchill was born to the upper class. He grew up with a strong sense of privilege and heritage, but his family was not particularly rich. In this picture, you see both Jack and Winston alongside their mother. Biography Part 2. Winston had great respect for his father, but his father was often very disappointed in him. He adored his mother, but loved her from a distance because she was very involved in the English upper-class society and always put her husband first. His parents were frequently traveling without Winston. Winston's mother hired a nanny named Mrs. Elizabeth Everest, who took care of him more than anyone else did, and this created a very tight bond with her. Winston felt she was the one who he was able to confide in, and he referred to her as Womanny. Winston was sent to boarding school in 1881 at the age of 7. He was miserable and hated it. Winston only lasted at boarding school for less than a year, saying that he had left it for health reasons. While Winston was attending school, he frequently wrote and stayed in contact with Mrs. Everest. In 1882, Winston attended Brighton, which was where he completed his elementary school education. Winston enrolled in 1888 to the Harrow, which is a school outside of London. He was at the bottom of his class for performing badly on entrance exams. Due to doing so poorly in school, his father was very disappointed. Winston was athletic and won his school's fencing championship. He excelled in classes that he enjoyed, which included English and history. Winston was not able to attend university due to his poor performance in school. Instead, he attended the Royal Military College, Sandhurst, after passing the entrance exam on his 3rd attempt. He did not score well enough to be admitted into the infantry, which he wanted to, but had enough points to be in the cavalry. He attended Sandhurst for 18 months, and he was successful and graduated 20th out of 130th in his class. This is something that you would not expect out of someone who did not do well in school. But like I said, Churchill excelled at subjects that interested him. During all his time in school and growing up, Winston felt sad and lonely. Winston went through difficult times in 1895. He lost his father, and then 6 months later, Mrs. Everest. His father died on January 24th, 1895, and his nanny died on July 3rd, 1895. When Winston had learned that Mrs. Everest was sick, he went to be by her bedside and tried to help her as much as he could. Out of everyone in his family, he was the only one who went to see her, and when she died, he provided the tombstone for her grave. This picture shows Mrs. Everest, who was his nanny and closest friend growing up. Biography Part 3. Winston Churchill was just 18 years old when he first joined the British cavalry. He served as a cavalry officer in the 4th Queen's Own Hussars. Winston had wanted to make his father proud and follow in his political footsteps, but his father died before he had the chance. While Winston was in the cavalry, he became an excellent horseman who enjoyed riding, and when not in times of war, was a champion polo player. While in the military, Winston craved action. He worked very hard to get posted to any battlefront so that he could be in the height of the action. His mother had many family connections and helped him get posted to these dangerous locations. While Winston was in the military, to supplement his army pay, he began to write articles on military campaigns. Churchill stayed in the military until he left to pursue a career in writing and politics. Not only did Churchill write articles in the military campaigns, but he also published many books that were about his time serving in the military. One of the most famous books he wrote is the story of the Malakand Field Force. While at the age of 25 in 1899, Churchill was reporting on the Boer War in South Africa while working for the Morning Post. The armored train he and other British Army soldiers were on was ambushed, and even though Churchill claimed correspondent status, they still took him as a prisoner of war. Churchill was able to escape while scaling a wall when his captors had their backs turned. He managed to stow away on supply trains with the help of local British supporters. He received a hero's welcome when he returned to South Africa, and this fame helped him launch his political career. Outside of war and politics, Churchill had a family. Churchill met Clementine Hazier in 1904 and were married in 1908. They ended up having 5 children together, named Diana, Randolph, Sarah, Marigold, and Mary, as well as 10 grandchildren. Sadly, their daughter Marigold died at the age of 2 due to septicemia. Winston Churchill promised to spend time with his children and was a devoted, affectionate parent, unlike his father. Biography conclusion. Throughout Winston's life, he worked hard for his father's respect. No matter what he did, his father was never proud of him and set almost impossible goals for him to meet. Winston's father, Lord Randolph, was more concerned about his social and political life than he ever was about a relationship with his son. Winston was a disappointment to him in school, and the reason Winston ended up in the military was because of his poor grades, which was also a disappointment to his father. At one point, while Winston was at school, his father gave a speech at a location only 2 miles away, but could not take time to stop and visit his son. Winston would write frequently to his parents, and from 1885 to 1892, he wrote them 76 times. They only responded to him 6 times, and the letters were primarily negative, showing disappointment. Even though Winston was treated this way by his father, who he worshipped and always spoke highly of him. Winston Churchill's political career began in 1900 as a member of Parliament. MP is the shortened version of that, and the House of Commons for Oldham. Churchill later served as MP in Manchester, Dundee, and Woodford. Churchill was also a member of the British Cabinet and oversaw board and trade. He also served in the Cabinet, in the munitions, and in the War and Air Ministries. He headed the Treasury as Chancellor of the Exchequer from 1924 to 1929. Interestingly, this was a position once held by his father. One of Churchill's greatest failures was during World War I, while serving as First Lord of the Admiralty, when an attempt failed to seize the Dardanelles and Gallipoli Peninsula, which connected the Mediterranean Black Seas. What Churchill is primarily recognized for is his contribution to World War II while serving as Prime Minister. Churchill is credited for rallying the British from the brink of defeat to victory in World War II. Churchill served as Prime Minister twice. The first term was from 1940 to 1945, and the second term was from 1951 to 1955, when the Conservatives triumphed and Churchill returned as Prime Minister. His second term ended in 1955 due to illness. Winston Churchill was honored by Queen Elizabeth II on April 24, 1953, when he was named a Knight of the Garter. Sir Winston Churchill died at the age of 90 on Sunday, January 24, 1965. Ironically, he died on the same day as his father, but 70 years later. Over the period from 1949 until his death, Churchill suffered from 8 strokes. The last stroke occurred January 15, 1965. He died at his home, Hyde Park Gate, London. Without Winston Churchill, it is difficult to know what the outcome of World War II truly would have been. Churchill was already 65 years old when he became Prime Minister in 1940 on the very day that Hitler invaded France. Churchill's speeches and broadcasts rallied the British while defying Germany and seeking the help from the United States. Churchill assembled the Grand Alliance, which included 3 Allied powers, which was the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. While they did not always agree on the philosophy of the war, they all agreed that Hitler needed to be stopped. The fact that Americans know so much about Winston Churchill, who was important in Britain, just shows what a truly incredible person he was. This picture shows Churchill wearing his famous hat and carrying his walking cane while giving his famous V for Victory salute. Winston Churchill bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is a mental illness that causes shifts in an individual's mood, the ability to concentrate, and the energy to perform day-to-day tasks. When it comes to diagnosing Winston Churchill for bipolar disorder, it was between having type 1 or type 2. The symptoms of bipolar 1 disorder are determined by manic episodes lasting at least 7 days, and during which symptoms are experienced for nearly every day over this period or for most of the day. In some cases, the manic episode is so severe that the individual needs medical care immediately. Episodes of depression are also present in bipolar 1 disorder. Bipolar 2 disorder is when an individual experiences a pattern of hypomanic and depressive episodes. In bipolar 2 disorder, the episodes of hypomania are less severe than those experienced in individuals with bipolar 1 disorder. Signs and symptoms of a manic episode may include extreme highs, feelings of elation, or extreme irritability. Individuals may be more active than they usually are and have a decreased need for sleep. Individuals may also experience racing thoughts, excessive need for pleasurable activities, and may feel they are able to perform many tasks at once without tiring. Signs and symptoms of a depressive episode include feeling extreme sadness or anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and a decrease in the ability to make decisions. Individuals struggle to perform basic, simple tasks and feel hopeless, worthless, and may contemplate death or suicide. They also experience a lack of interest in almost all activities, even those they previously enjoyed. This picture clearly shows that people with bipolar disorder have their ups when they are happy and life feels like it's going well, and downs, which is when they are having depressive episodes. As the left circle here is sad, depressed, and the one on the right here is happy and energetic and outgoing. How and why Winston Churchill met bipolar according to the DSM-5 criteria. Based on Winston Churchill's symptoms, the diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder would make the most sense. It is documented that Winston Churchill dealt with bouts of severe depression that would last a few months. During these depressive episodes, Churchill would experience such severe symptoms that he was often paralyzed by despair, spent most of his time in bed, and had little to no energy. He also lost his ability to concentrate and participated in few, if any, of his previous interests. Winston Churchill would come out of these episodes feeling like his normal self and felt as if nothing had happened and everything was normal. Winston Churchill is also known for experiencing periods of extremely high energy levels. During these periods, he felt the need for little sleep. He would wake up as early as 8 a.m. and work until 2 or 3 a.m. the next day. During these manic episodes, Winston Churchill would talk incessantly about a wide range of topics, often not making sense. Franklin D. Roosevelt once said that Winston Churchill has thousands of ideas a day, and only 4 of them were good and made sense. This is stating that anyone could see that Churchill had extremes in his behaviors. He was either extremely depressed to the point where he had no energy and would not get out of his bed, or he would have extreme amounts of energy to the point where he would ramble on and not sleep. These are 2 very distinct mood changes, which are the most predominant signs of bipolar disorder. The type of bipolar disorder that would fit Churchill would be bipolar 1. The DSM-5 states that to be diagnosed with bipolar 1, individuals must experience at least 1 manic episode. This manic episode can come before or after an episode of depression. For an individual to meet the manic episodes criteria, they must experience 3 of the 7 symptoms listed. Of the 7 points, Churchill experiences a decreased need for sleep, racing thoughts, a need to keep talking, and a high work drive. There is no exact reasoning as to what causes this disorder, but childhood trauma is one of the possible causes. Winston Churchill experienced a lonely and stressful childhood. He experienced extreme anxiety when he was sent away to boarding school and was severely neglected by his parents. Winston also felt deprived of affection, which could also be a sign of childhood trauma. This picture on the bottom left shows Churchill during a period of depression with what he calls his black dog. The black dog will be covered more in the next slide. Here's him laying down, here's the black dog, and that would be during his depressive periods. Winston Churchill and the black dog. As part of Winston Churchill having bipolar disorder, he experienced many depressive episodes. Winston Churchill would refer to these dark and sad periods as his black dog. Churchill did not invent this term, as it was invented by nannies in the Victorian era who would use this term to refer to moody children. This term is very famous when it comes to Churchill and his mental health. Churchill knew that he had something wrong with him, and he would refer to this term, black dog, as his dark mood. Winston had written his wife a letter in 1911 saying that he felt he needed professional help to treat his black dog. This term is very symbolic and represents Churchill well. Black is a color that represents something sad and dark, such as his depressive periods, and a dog can represent an animal that never leaves your side and is always watching you. This means that when Winston was not dealing with depression, he knew that this sadness was always nearby, like a dog would be. Winston Churchill was also known to have fears and anxieties, such as train platforms or standing too close to the edge on a balcony. Churchill did not trust himself when given an opportunity to consider ending his own life. All these difficulties are what he considered his black dog. This picture shows Winston Churchill's imagined black dog lurking in his shadow. Winston Churchill was also known to have periods where he was unruly, and during these periods he would act erratically and overindulge in alcohol. The symptoms he experienced from the disorder were not caused by alcohol, but he would try and use it to help him get through these times. Winston Churchill living with bipolar disorder. Winston Churchill was someone who was so successful that you would not think that he had a mental health disorder. Winston Churchill did his best to keep his black dog on a leash and managed to keep spirits high for British citizens while preparing Great Britain for war. When he said that he kept the black dog on a leash, it meant that he did his absolute best to push through his periods of crippling depression. He understood that his sadness had to be contained to complete his job. Winston Churchill also knew how to take advantage of the periods that he had high levels of energy. He would use these periods of high energy to get more work done than he would normally be able to. Churchill thought of these times as positive periods rather than negative ones. He considered these manic periods his time where he would get the most work done, and he managed to publish 43 books, all while maintaining his duties as Prime Minister. Winston Churchill sought treatment from a physician, Lord Moran. He was prescribed medications to help manage his episodes of depression. This picture here shows medication, which is what Churchill was prescribed to help with his symptoms, right in the bottom right corner. Questions to help with diagnosis. Even though Churchill is not alive anymore, these questions would help solidify his diagnosis of bipolar I disorder. These questions would cover both aspects of bipolar disorder. We know approximately how long his depressive episodes would last, but we do not know how long his manic episodes lasted. The first question would be, how often do you experience periods of extreme energy, which is his manic episodes? Another question would be, do you feel that you have extreme highs and lows, and how long do they last? Do you feel that you can work continuously all day long and still not need to sleep at night? The final question would be, do you feel that these mood swings impact your ability to function in your daily life? And I wanted to end this presentation with one of Winston Churchill's most famous quotes. I feel this quote does a great job of showing his disorder, but in a positive way. And this quote says, if you're going through hell, keep going. And this can clearly show that he's considering his depressive episodes as hell. But as I stated before, his job is so important and he was so dedicated to it that he had to keep going and push through. Here's my references. And now, for each of my slides, I have the speaker notes here on the bottom of each one of them. Thank you so much.